Alright, so now our database related stuff is ready. Now let's work on our services. So in API project only, I'm going to create a new folder. Let's call it services. Inside this, we are going to start one by one. So first, we'll have our product service because this is the first thing when we open our app. It directly goes to the after onboarding. It directly goes to the products page. So we are not forcing user to log in initially. User can simply go uh, directly into the app, add products to the cart, and then when the user is going to check out, at that time we will ask user to log in. And we'll have login button before also, so user can log in before if user wants to. So the first thing we'll show product service. Let's use product service. Here we are going to inject our data context. Let's call it context. This is the naming I follow. Create and assign a field. Alright, and inside this we are going to have one method public async task and return product array of products. Let's say get products. You can implement paging, filtering, all those things, but I'm just keeping it simple, so I'm not having all those things. Now we will not directly return product from here. Instead, we'll have some DTOs. Okay. What I will do, I will simply go to this product. I'll copy all the properties. I am going to go into the shared project, create a new folder. Let's call DTOs. Inside this, I'm going to say product DTO.cs. Here I'm going to have my product DTO as public class product DTO. And here we don't need all these data annotations because we are not using this for adding anything. We are using it just for displaying purpose. So we are good. Product DTO, ID name, image URL, unit price. We are good. Let's go to product service. And from here, we are going to return array of product DTO. Get products async. Right? And from here, we can directly return await context dot products dot as no tracking. We don't need any tracking for this. Dot select. We need to transform these products to product DTO. We'll say new product DTO and then we'll fill out all these values: ID, image URL, name, price, and unit. And we are good. Then we'll simply say dot to array async. And our method is ready. Alright, let's move it to multiple lines, break it, and now we are good. Get products async. Product service is ready. Cool. Second, so for adding the items to the cart, what we are going to do, we will have those items locally stored in the SQLite database on mobile device only. So we are not going to have cart in our API. Okay. And when user is placing the order, so after placing the order, then we'll push this the items to our API. That means after this product service, we need order service, but in order to work with order service, we need user information. So after this, we are going to work on user service, or we can call it simply auth service. Okay. Here we are going to have our context, data context underscore context equals this context. Cool. Now in here we are going to have two endpoints. login and register. Two methods basically, login and register. Okay. So for this also we will need a couple of DTOs. So let's go to our shared project DTOs. First, for registration, we'll create a public record, or we can simply say public string, or not string, public class register DTO. Here we need username, but why this struct is coming? Name. Then we need, my god, no, again, string email. Then we are going to have mobile. Then we are going to have password. All right. After register DTO, we are going to have one more login DTO. So this we can create as a record, or we will use data annotation on UI side. So let's create it as class only, login DTO. Here we are going to have username and password, public string password. Alright, now this is going to be required with the max length of 50. You can have user email, right? So in user, what is the max length of email? 150. We can skip this max length check. Just have it as required. Password is also going to be required. Same thing for register DTO, typo register DTO. We are going to have all these as required. So required name, required email, and required password. Mobile is not going to be required, so we can skip this thing. After logging in, we will have the logged in users information, right? So for that, I'm going to create a public record logged in user. Here we are going to have user ID, so we'll say int ID, string name, string email, and we are going to have a token as well, string token, JWT token, which we'll use. I think we are good. Let's move these two separate files. Move type to register DTO, move type to login DTO, and move type to logged in user. Now for returning the result from the API, we are going to use a centralized type, a common type. The type is going to be, let's have it a public record, we'll say API result. This is going to be the type which we'll return. So here we'll say API result bool, its success, and a label string error. For this, I'm going to have static factory methods for ease of our use. So here we'll say public static API result, we'll say success. From here, we will simply return true as its success and null as error. And second method for failure, so we'll say fail. And here we are going to get error message as a parameter, and its success is going to be false for this, and the error message we will have this as error. Save it. Let's move it to a separate file. We have this API result now, and I'm going to create one more version of this API result if we want to pass some data with this API result. For that, we are going to have this t data, so I'm going to make it generic. And here, the second parameter, we are going to have this data. So for success, we will provide data as a parameter. This should return t data. The second thing also return t data. So the success should have true and then data and then null. Fail will simply have false for its success. For data, we don't need to provide anything, so we'll use the default value, whatever default it is. We are not going to use it. And we can simply have this null forgiving operator. We are not concerned about this. Save everything, and now we are good. Our API result type is ready. Let's go back to our auth service. So first we need registration. So we'll say public async task API result register async and register DTO as a parameter. Let's just call it DTO. Here we'll first check if the email already exists. So here we can simply say if await underscore context dot users dot any async. Here we can simply say u dot email equals DTO dot email. If that's the case, then we'll simply say return API result dot fail. Here we'll say email already exists, something like this. If that's not the case, we just need to create the user. We'll say var user equals new user. This user is entity. Here we'll set all these things: email, mobile, name, and user address is not ID will be auto generated. Then we need password hash. So for hashing, we can simply use iPassword hasher of type user, which is our user. So we'll say password hasher, create an assigned field, and we can use this to hash our password. Here we'll say user dot password hash equals password hasher dot hash password. Here we need to provide user and then plain password. That will be DTO dot password. Now our user model is ready. After this, we can simply have a try catch block here. Then in try, we'll simply say context dot users dot add this user. Then we'll say await context dot save changes async. Then we'll simply return API result dot success. If that's not the case, if we are in this EX here, we should log the exception. Okay, and then maybe send some user friendly error message to the client. But for this demo, I'm just using API result dot fail. I'll simply return ex dot message. So whatever exception I am getting, I'll simply return it to the client. So register async method is ready. Now let's work on login. Public async task API result. From here we will return logged in user, API result of logged in user. Okay, and as a parameter we'll get login DTO. What happened? 1212 login DTO is fine. Then what is happening? DTO login DTO. Oh, name of the method, sorry, login async. All right, now we just need to check. First we will get the user, so we'll say var user equals await context dot users dot find async. We will simply say DTO, no, not find async. For find async we need to provide the user ID. So we'll say first or default async u dot email equals DTO dot email. This is what we are using, DTO dot username for our username. Right, then we'll simply check. If user is null, that means this email does not exist. So from here we'll simply say return API result of logged in user dot fail. Then we'll simply say that User does not exist. Now, if that's not the case, we need to verify the password. Okay. So here we have our password hasher dot verify hashed password. Here we can provide our user, then hashed password, that will be user.password hash, then provided password, that is DTO.password. Now it returns a password verification result enum var verification result equals this. Then we can simply check if verification result equal password verification result dot. Let's say if this is not success, we'll say not equal success. Then we'll return this similar method. Return API result of logged in user dot fail. We'll say incorrect password. If that is also not the case, then we'll simply generate a JWT token. Generate token. Okay. Token, or let's say JWT equals JWT token. We'll work on this after some time. Then we are going to have our logged in user equals new logged in user. Then we need to have ID is user.id, name user.name, user.email, and then this JWT. With this we are done. We can simply return API result of logged in user dot success. Then we'll just need to provide this logged in user here. Save it. And with this, our auth service is also ready. Except this JWT, we'll work on this. Alright, so now user is logged in. We have items in the cart. Now user will press the maybe place order button or checkout button, whatever it is. We need to allow user to place the order. Okay. But before placing the order, because in order placement we will need address as well, right? So we need address as well. So first let's work on maybe user service. So public class, let's call it user service only. Same thing, constructor will have our data context, private read only field. Then in here we are going to have public async task address creation, that address creation and address add and edit address method basically. So for this also we need a DTO. We'll go to our shared project. Let's create a DTO. We'll say public class address save DTO. Okay. So here we are going to have just address, and we are going to have a boolean is default, and we have one more, right? Name of the address. So default. Then we are going to have string name, and all these three are required, and is default is fine. Address save DTO, and let's have ID as well so that we can use the same DTO for both add and edit. We'll have, what was that, int or long? Is int. So we'll have int ID. Okay. Then let's have one more type to display these addresses. I think we can use the same thing for all, for add, edit, and display, because these are the fields which are going to be there. Cool. So let's use this. Save. Let's go to our user service. Here we'll say public async task From here, we are going to result API result. We are going to return API result. We'll say save address async. We are going to have address DTO as a parameter and user ID as a parameter for this user. All right. So let's add this address to the user ID. We'll say var address equals new user address. We are going to create this entity here. So we will have address, DTO address, ID is default, name, and user ID. All right. But this thing we need only for add case. So let's have a condition first. Here we'll say if uh, dto.id, if this is equals 0, that means we are creating a new address. We'll simply put this thing inside here, and what we'll do outside of this if case, we are simply going to have a nullable user address, and we will use this thing. We have created this DTO, this user address entity. Then we'll simply say context dot user addresses dot add user address. Now in the else case, this is for updating an existing address. So here we'll say user address equals, we'll get this address from the database. So context dot user addresses, here we can simply say dot find async. We can simply provide dto.id because this is going to be a primary key. Then we'll simply check if user address is null. That means this is an invalid request. API result dot fail invalid request. If that's not the case, we need to modify these things. So we can modify everything but ID and user ID, of course. Right? Here we'll say user address dot address equals DTO dot address. Then we'll say user address dot name equals DTO dot name. Then user address dot is default equals DTO dot is default. With this, we are good, and then we'll simply update. Although this is tracking, but let's do it explicitly. So we'll say underscore context dot user addresses dot update user address. Now outside of this if and else, we can simply have a try catch block, and we'll simply say await context dot save changes async. Then we'll return API result dot success. If we are in the catch, we'll simply log the exception and then simply return API result dot fail ex dot message. Cool, we are good. But there is one more thing which we'll work on. So this is default. There can be only one default address at a time, right? So we need to handle this case. When we are adding a new address, we will check if we already have a default address. Okay, so let's quickly maybe let's do this. Here before saving changes, let's say get default address, await context dot user addresses. I'm just thinking right now. So first dot default, we are going to say a dot is default, and before this we'll say a dot user ID equals this user ID and his default is true. Then we'll simply check if default address is null. We don't need to worry about it, but if this is not null, if the user address is this the default address is not null, that means we already have a default address and we are trying to create a address. We need to do this if the DTOs dot is default is true. That means if we are creating a new address with a default, we will check if we have any other address which is default. So we need to set the previous default address to not default and the new address will be automatically set to default. So that is what we need to do. Here we'll say default address is not null. Then we'll say default address dot is default equals false. This is for new case. If this is for existing case, that means we are setting is default to true. But if it was already default, that means this default address is the same address. So here we can have one more check. And a.id is not equals DTO. Now we are good. So what we are saying, if in this request we are saying that is default to true, so we'll go one by one. Let's say we are creating a new address. We came here, we set this is default to true, and when we are coming here we'll check, okay, user is trying to create a new address with is default true. Then what we'll do, we'll simply go to the database and try to find addresses of this user which is default, and for the first case it will be ignored. If this is not null, that means user already has a default address. So we need to set that default address to non-default because this new address is going to be default now. So far so good. Now for edit case. If we came in edit case, we have two options, two things. The current address, if it was already is default, it will simply come here, it will not pass, it will continue and it will set the is default to true, the same as before. Now if user has set it to true but it was false earlier, then it will handle this case. I hope it sounds confusing, but I hope if you pay attention, you will understand what is happening here. Alright, so with this, we are done with our save address. Now we need to work on the get the addresses. So we'll say public async task. From here, we are going to get address DTO, array of address DTO, get addresses. Here we are going to get user ID as a parameter. From here, we can simply return await context dot user addresses dot as no tracking dot where a dot id equals user ID. Then we are going to say dot select a goes to new address DTO. Then we'll set all these ID, address is default and name. Then dot to array async. Alright, let's break it to multiple lines. Save it and we are good with our address service now. That means user service. We'll see what else we need to add in this user service, but for now we are good. Now we can go to the order service. Public class order service. Same constructor. We'll inject our data context. Okay. with this underscore context as a private read-only class level field. Save it. Now here, what we need first, we will have order place public async task of API result. Let's say place order async, and here it should be get addresses async. Place order async. We need to have some DTO here. After placing the order, we need to have method public async task. Hmm, yes, we will need get user orders async, and for this we can have our paging. So we'll say int user id, int start index, and int page size. Then we can have one more method to get the information of some particular order, public async task, or let's say order items of an order. Here we'll say public async task get user order items async. Here we can simply just have order id, nothing else. It will suffice because in order id, one order id belong to one user only, so we can do this. And we can, let's say, have user id check as well, so we can validate if this user belongs to this order belongs to this user only. So we need these three things here. So for place order, we need to have a DTO for order place related stuff. Then get user orders, we need to have a orders DTO. Order items async, so we need to have order item DTO. So let's go to shared project, and we are going to create our DTO. Public class first, we'll create order item DTO, which is going to have public long id. Let's copy the order item entity, these fields. We'll see what all we need to add there. In order item DTO, we need id. We don't need order id. We'll get it. We will not uh, send or receive this order item DTO alone. It will be a part of order always. Then we have product ID, product name, product price, quantity, unit, product image, URL. So that means we need to have two things now. For displaying purpose, we will have all these things. But when we will create or place the order, then there is no point of having all these things. That time we will just have product ID and quantity, because all other things should be fetched directly from the database at that. Let's do this. We'll say public class order item save detail, something like this. Here we are going to have product ID, okay, which will be required of course, and we are going to have quantity. This is also going to be required. And for this we'll have denied value, 0 is not allowed, or maybe we can have range. It should start from 1 to whatever it is as well, but at least one quantity should be there. Alright, so order item save DTO is fine. Then this is order item DTO. Here we can have all these things. Cool. After this, we are going to have a order DTO, public class order save DTO, and public class order DTO, which will be used for displaying purpose. We can go to our order.cs entity. Let's copy everything from there. Copy order DTO. Here, let's see, we don't need this. We don't need user ID because we know this will belong to some user. Order DTO. First, when we will save the order, at that time we will not have ID. We will have date, but we can get this date from the API server side only. Total amount, remarks, status, user address. What should we have in this order save DTO? We can have a user ID. We will have this as a part of request also. Hmm. Then we need user address ID here. What is the address user is selecting? And then order items. These things we will have as a separate thing here. Order save DTO. I guess we are good. Or maybe we can then skip this order save DTO and we can simply have a place order DTO, something like this. Yeah, let's call it this. We'll say public plus order, sorry, place order DTO, like this. Place order DTO. Okay, can make it right if we want to. So place order DTO. Here we are going to have these two things. Int user ID, or we can skip this int user ID because this we can get from the current logged in users information, right? Here we just need to have a user address ID. Then we need to have a order items. That means this order item saved DTO. Order item saved DTO array of this. Say we here will say items. We don't need order saved DTO. Save it and we should be good. In order DTO, for displaying purpose, we have ID, fine. We have date, we have total amount, we have remarks, we have status. No need to set this default. This is for displaying. We can remove all these things. User address ID and address. We can get rid of user address ID. For this address, we will have address and addresses. We can have address name as well. And order items, we will not have it inside this thing because we are going to have a separate call for order items list. In order DTO, we can have one thing that will be public int total items, something like this. Item count for quick start. And this address name, we don't have this in our order entity, right? We have user address ID, we have address, we should have address name as well. String address name and this total item, right? This also we should have in here. In order entity. Now I have updated the order entity. So we need to create new migrations for this thing. Let's quickly do that. I'll say add migration. Let's say add address and add address name and what did we add? Total items, item count to order, something like this. This name is up to you. You can name it whatever you want. And that output directory command that we just need to add at the very first time. After that, it automatically gets it. We have API project here. We have API project here. Okay, it will not build. Oh my. It will not build because in our uh, order service, we have those incomplete methods. Okay, we'll do this in a bit. Right now, we are good with our DTOs. Let's move these DTOs to separate files. So order item save DTO, move it. Order item DTO, place order DTO, and then order DTO. All right, save everything. Let's go to our services. We are in order service. So we are here place order async method. We'll say place order DTO, and we'll have int user ID. Okay. Now in place order, what we have user address ID and items. We have these things. Okay. So let's try to add with the place order DTO. We need to insert data in two different tables, right? First, we need to add in order, then we need to add in order items. Let's generate our first, let's say we'll have our order items ready. This we can get from DTO dot items dot. Here we are going to select the new order item, this entity. We are going to set these things. So we don't have ID, we don't have order ID right now, we have product ID. So we'll set I dot product ID. Then we need to have product information for this order. So we have two approaches. Either we can get all this information from the client, or we can get all these information here only if we want to. Let's say products equals, here we can say await context dot products dot where. Now we need all the products which are inside these order items, right? So here we'll say product IDs equals DTO dot items dot select. Here we'll say I dot product ID dot to array. Now we have these product IDs. So here inside this where we'll say product IDs dot contains, and we are going to say p dot id. We can say to has set. Alright, so where we have these products dot to array is. Now we have all these products which are going to be used inside this thing. Now here what we can do is, we can, instead of having two array async, let's say two dictionary async, we can create a dictionary for direct lookup. Here we need to provide the key selector first. So we'll say p dot product id, or p dot id will be the key. All right, now we can quickly verify one thing. That one thing is going to be, if we have all these products available, we can say products dot count, it should match exactly with the DTO dot items dot length, right? It should match. If it is not matching, we can simply say return API result dot fail, some product is not available, something like this. If that's not the case, we have products now. Now we are here in item.select. We are generating our order item entities. So we set product ID. We'll set quantity equals I dot quantity. After that, we have order ID auto generated. Order ID will be auto generated. Product image URL. Now this product image URL, this we are going to get from this products of. Now this is a dictionary, so I dot product ID dot image URL. Okay. Same thing we can do with product name. Same thing we can do with product price. Same thing we can do with unit. Okay. You can have this simple product in outside of this select if you want to. Not outside of this select, but you can have a separate method or internal computation kind of thing. So you will access this only once, but because this is dictionary, so lookup is 1 to 1, so we are okay with it. Then we'll simply say to array. Now we are done with the order items. Now we just need to generate our order detail. For order equals new order. Here what all we need, ID will be auto generated, date. We can store UTC now. So we'll say now equals datetime dot UTC now. So will be now. After that we have address name, which will be from the DTO dot okay user address ID. So we need to get user address information as well. This before this maybe we can simply get var user address equals, or maybe we can provide this from the UI only. If you don't want to do this here, let's provide it from UI only. For this, in place order DTO, what we'll do, user address ID string address string address name, can have these things as parameters here, and then here we'll say DTO dot address ID. We'll say user address ID like this. After that, we'll have our address as DTO.address, then address name as DTO.address name. Then we have items which we know status is fine, total amount. This we'll calculate. Here we'll say total amount, or maybe directly we can calculate here. So the total amount, this is going to be DTO dot items, or maybe let's do this. In this place order DTO, comma, we are going to have to computed property public int, we'll say total items which will be items dot length. Then we can also have decimal total amount. This is going to be items dot sum of what, sum of I dot quantity times I dot product price. What is it? I dot price. Oh, we don't have that price here. Okay, let's leave it, because we are getting the product information directly from the database in here only. So we'll have that here. Okay, all right, no problem. So total, first let's have total items. This we can get DTO dot items dot length, then total amount. This we are going to get from this order items. Order items dot sum OI dot quantity times OI dot price. This is how we will be able to get the total amount. Now our order is also ready. Now we just need to add this order to the database. Let's have try catch await context dot save changes async, but before that we need to say context dot orders dot add order. And here in order we missed one thing. We need to have our items as order items. Cool. This exception will simply return API result dot fail ex dot message, and with this success case we'll simply return API result dot success. Save it. Oh my god, we did a lot of coding, but we are good now. We are not using this user ID, we are missing it. So when we are creating the order, we need to set user ID as well. User ID like this. Cool. Save it. Place order async method is ready. Now we have get user addresses async. Let's add these. We'll say var addresses equals await context dot user addresses dot as no tracking dot where a dot user id equals this user id. On this we'll say we need to have some order by. Can have order by anything, maybe order by a dot id, order by descending we can have. Then just skip start index and take page size dot to array async. Save it. We are good. Let's break it to multiple lines, and because this is single line we can simply use expression body. We'll simply do this. Save it and we are good. It is going to return task of, okay, it should return address DTO, right? We are not done yet. Address DTO, we need to use select here, where dot select, or we can have it after this order by or at the very end. Let's dot select new address DTO, fill out id a dot address is default and name, and we are good. Save it. Good. Now we have get user order items sync. Okay, so we'll get the order items of this user of this order. First, let's access this order. So we'll say var order equals await context dot orders dot as orders dot as no tracking dot first dot default async. We'll say o dot id equals order id. Alright. Then we'll simply check if order is null. Will return, so it should return API result of order item DTO. From here we'll return API result order item DTO array dot fail. Here we'll say order not found. Alright, if that's not the case, then we'll verify if this order belongs to this user only. So here we can say order dot user id equals this user id. If this is not true, so not equals, then we'll return. Then also we should return order not found. We can return this thing, right? Or you can, if you want to send descriptive message, you can say this order does not belong to you, something like that. But we are good with this. Now that if that is also not the case, we can return the order items from here. So what we can do, instead of having two calls, we can have this in one call only. Before first or default, we can simply say, let's say include. We can include our order items. O dot items. We are including order items. Then we'll change this first or default to where to select. Or maybe let's do this. So default, let it pull all. Then at the very end, we will simply return order dot items dot select new order item DTO. Now we'll fill out all these things: ID, product image URL, product name, product price, quantity, unit, dot to array. What happened? We need to return API result. All right. Var items equals this. Then we'll simply return API result of order item DTO array dot success items. With this we are good. Here I just noticed we should have one more check here. When we are placing the order, we should have items in that order. If we don't have any item, then it should not allow, right? You can quickly have a check here. DTO dot items dot length equals 0. If that's the case, we'll fail the request. Order must contain items like this. So looks like we are good with our order service as well. Great. I guess we are good with these. Now what else? First, let's move these to separate files. So order service, we'll move to order service. User service, we'll move it to user service. Auth service, let's move it to auth service. Save everything. And yeah, in user service, we have user address only, right? Let's add change password functionality as well that we will have in user service, and maybe profile update. We'll see if we need, we'll add it later. Right now, let's just have a change password. Public async task API result change password async, and let's go to our DTOs. In our DTOs, we are going to have public class change password model of change password DTO. We could say string current password, string new password, string new password, and we are going to have confirm new password. All these are going to be required. Change password DTO, change password. For this confirm new password, let's have a compare thing, name of new password. So we'll compare these two things. These two should match, must match. All right. And then this confirm new password, we don't need to move this or send this to the API. We can simply have JSON ignore on it. Okay. On server side, API side, we will just use current password and new password. No need to send this. This is going to be just for UI validation, that user knows what password he or she is typing. Cool. Let's go to user service. Here we are going to have change password DTO and then int user ID. All right. First, we'll find this user. We'll say await context underscore context dot users dot find async this user ID. Now, if user is null, very rare case, return API result dot fail. User does not exist. After this, we'll verify the current password if user has entered the current password correctly. Okay. For this, we need to verify. So we'll verification result, password verification result. So do we have password hasher here? No, right? Let's inject that. I password hasher of type user will password hasher with underscore prefix. Here we'll say underscore password hasher dot verify hashed password. First, we'll provide user, then hash password. So user dot password hash, then the provided password, that will be DTO dot current password. Okay. Then we'll simply check if verification result is not equals password verification result dot success. We'll simply return API result dot fail. We'll say incorrect password. If the password is correct, then we need to generate a new hash for the new password. We can say simply user.password hash equals password hasher hash password. We will provide user and then plain password, which will be DTO.new password. Alright. Then we can say context dot users dot update this user, then await context dot save changes async. Then we'll return API result dot success. Let's wrap this entire thing in a try catch block. So we'll wrap this thing from exception. We'll simply return API result dot fail ex dot. I guess with this we are good with our user service as well. Great. Now let's quickly register these services in our dependency container in API project. So in API program.cs before builder.build, we'll simply say builder.services.add. Let's say what all we have. .add transient. We have auth service, auth service. Then add transient we have order service dot add transient. Then we have product service dot add transient. Then we have user service. User service. And we have one more thing. We are using iPassword hasher. So we need to register that as well. So we'll say iPassword hasher of type user. This is what we are using. User entity. This should be registered with password hasher, which comes from ASP.NET Core identity only. Our service registration is ready. Cool. Now next thing we can work on our API endpoints. All right.